Night shift workers share the scariest thing they've experienced. I work nights and at a private auto shop or limousine company. I usually change tires, detail cars, clean cars, etc., the small stuff. Occasionally, my boss will leave a list with things for me to do, like errands or something. The garage is located like 3 blocks away from the sketchy part of town, and one night my boss wants me to drop off an envelope at some random house down the street. It was close, so I figured I'd just walk. The house I delivered looked sketchy and run down as hell, but I didn't think anything of it. After all, the shitty part of town was just a few blocks away. I walk up the driveway and deliver this envelope, and as I turn to leave, I see this dude stranded at the end of the driveway. Bro has one arm and is bleeding profusely from his nose. He just stared at me and then eventually hobbled off. I didn't say anything, I didn't even blink. I kind of speed walked away after he left. I took an alternate path back to the garage, even though it was only a short walk. I stayed there until the sun came up, and shortly after I picked up some bear spray as it is illegal to carry guns in my country. I have never seen him since, but man, that was scary. Not exactly night shift, but when I worked as a bartender I worked in an old bar. The building had been around in some form since the late 1800s and was expanded multiple times over the years. The building definitely had some quirks, but everyone who had worked there for a while had all had some sort of unexplainable experience. Lights turning off and on, seeing shadowy figures in the basement storage room, unexplained voices and other sounds. However, we all also knew you don't fuck with the unexplained, it wouldn't fuck with you. After one of the dishwashers decided to get smart with the energies that be and was pushed down the basement stairs and got a nasty concussion and broken collarbone. Anyway, once a month, we would stay extra late and do a very deep clean. I'm talking pulling out all the appliances, moving the tables and chairs out, emptying all the fridges and coolers and defrosting them, and bleaching everything down. Normally we would leave around 2 to 3 a.m. after our normal breakdown and cleaning, but when we would clean, we would treat it as a party and get drunk. The chef wouldn't care if we made ourselves some food as long as we turned everything off and threw the dirties in the dish pit when finished, and we would leave around 4 to 5 a.m. accomplished, ready for our day off. Well, most of the high strangeness happened downstairs on the ground floor and basement. Our bar was on the 3rd floor, and the most that happened was that the metal chandeliers over the tables would all swing and sway and sync with each other. This night we were the last ones in the building. We were going to be the ones in charge of locking the safe and setting the alarm that night. Around 3:30 a.m., the 3 of us were moving the last of the tables back in and were going to get new linens. We started talking about how one of the bartenders in the restaurant downstairs was locked in the beer fridge for about 15 minutes after a full keg he placed outside the door somehow slid about 2 inches over and prevented him from opening it from the inside. Tables and chairs are back in place. I was pouring myself a beer, Allagash White, when the lights went out. Off-putting but not entirely strange, we then heard the chandeliers start swinging violently. Not like a strong breeze rolled through, but as if someone grabbed them, brought them to their highest apex, and then swung them down with all their might. My friend Jay was behind the bar with me digging through the chest cooler, and the door got slammed shut on her arm. This happened in about 4 seconds in a very dark bar, only illuminated by a few red exit signs, when our manager M started shrieking bloody murder. On the landing of the stairs that led to our door was a translucent figure of a large man about 7 to 8 feet tall that was slowly, sliding. Their legs made contact with the ground but didn't move yet. The figure propelled itself forward slowly, and the light began to flash on and off. We didn't wait, and we didn't grab our coats or bags, we got the fuck out of there. It's the middle of winter, L and M were in cocktail dresses, and I was in a button-up and dress slacks. My keys were in my pocket, so we got in my car and smoked in the parking lot across the street, watching as the lights flashed on and off for an hour. It wasn't until M said we needed to go back in to get our things and lock up did any of us even consider going back in. Once we did and slowly got back up to the 3rd floor, the tables and chairs were out of place, and the sole turned upside down or flipped to the side. Caps were opened, and the kegs were drained. Half the liquor bottles that were back on the shelves were knocked down and broken. Our juicer was thrown at the rail, and those bottles were destroyed. Menus were everywhere, and some of the chandeliers had hit the walls, putting holes in them. We just grabbed our coats and bags and left. M texted the owners to just watch the cameras if they had any questions about what happened. We were still called in the next day and questioned about what happened and if we just got out of control. The security cameras caught a lot of what happened, but there was no footage of when the liquor bottles were destroyed. The cameras conveniently went down for a few things. Owners wouldn't give me a copy of the video no matter how many times I asked, saying the system could only record and store footage for 48 hours and we couldn't make copies. In 2015? Yeah, right. We refused to stay and clean up. We told the owner he could fire the entire staff for the upstairs bar or get a busboy from downstairs to do it, and we'd tip them out. Em didn't open the bar on Monday. On Tuesday, when Em and I both had to go in to open, we ended up opening late because we needed to clean all the sticky liquor that spilled everywhere and dried, and we had to strategically move some pictures to cover the holes until the maintenance man could get to them. We closed early until Friday, but we only did our standard closing clean then and got out of there as fast as we could. We had a ghost story in our shop. We worked on an AF base in Japan, which used to be a World War II base. The hangar itself was deteriorating but was still good enough to work in, I guess. Years before I got there, one of the guys had seen an old Japanese man dressed in white walk by but was not on camera. It was late at night, and the only people on shift were in different buildings. At night, my coworkers and I would hear bumps and things, but it could have been the rats in the ceiling. One of the nights when I wasn't there, they heard something fall. I went to check and saw it was a hard hat. The issue with this was that it was on rubber padding and hadn't moved all day. We have cameras, and they went to check. They showed me the same footage that morning. It looked like it was being slowly pushed off. It would happen again every so often, and I always summed it up to it not being placed properly. But I definitely wasn't going to check the cameras in case I was wrong. I once worked second in a factory. That had several times that things went weird. For context, the place was just adding second to the shift rotation, so it was me and 2 to 3 other people in our department. The only other people were 2 on the other side of the building by the entrance or exit. First, for several months we had no parking lot lights in half the parking lot. When the safety guy informed us they were installed, it was nice to not have the back end of the parking lot covered in shroud. Second, the warehouse was devoid of life, complete with flickering, epileptic-inducing light. I have to say that even with all the other lights on, having that one light flicker is still pretty unnerving. Third, the juicy one. One day I was going about my business, nothing wrong, nothing bad. I'm walking someplace for some reason, I forgot, and not paying attention. Look up dude, I don't recognize is walking towards me. To say I was freaked out would be an understatement. Dude walks right past me without a care in the world. So, I watch him. He walks out to the dumpsters, throws something away, and walks right back the way he came. No words, nothing. I was totally freaking out at this point. I got to know one of the people who was working by the door. Yeah, he was the brother of the cleaning lady who helped out every once in a while. No one told me. Fourth, one day I'm working, totally vibing and doing my thing, and the lady from HR walks up to me. Weird. She then proceeds to ask me if I've seen anyone suspicious around. No? Why do you ask? Because we saw someone on cams last night and some items were missing, we called the cops. Silence me. Oh, okay. Nope, I didn't see anything. Execute internal freakout mode. It turns out a dude just walked in through an adjoining door meant for shared bathrooms and took things. Fifth, because it's fun. One day I came in to find the small room constructed in front of the bathrooms had its ceiling completely fallen in. Like ceiling tiles all over the place and metal. Luckily, it was just a room constructed in a warehouse, so it wasn't anything bad. Like a good little gremlin, I asked what happened. The ceiling collapsed on Matt. Me. What? Like how? My coworker, the ceiling fell down while Matt was under it. Me, he slammed the door like everyone tells him not to, hun. My coworker, how did you guess? Me, I don't know. Dude comes scrambling around a corner on a forklift. Just a guess. Pretty tame, but still a bit sketchy. I worked the closing shift as a dishwasher at a pizza place when I was a teenager. I was taking the trash back to the dumpster when I saw a plastered guy tripping over himself and mumbling. I watched him periodically slam his head into the wall before he turned a corner. I took out another trash can a little bit later and saw him unconscious in another store's employee parking lot at the end of the alley. While I was contemplating what to do, 2 guys walked up to him and stole all his shit, took his shoes, and then ran off. He came back a third time to see people helping him before getting carted off into an ambulance. I still think about how shitty and confusing waking up the next day must have been for him. Another one is a bit less tame and a bit more sketchy. Same pizza place, but earlier in the night, right after closing. An obviously crazy guy came up to the window screaming about controlling dynamite and gunpowder and being a demigod. We told him to go away, and he started trying to open the door. When he realized it was locked, he started punching the window, threatened to rape everybody in there, and said he killed his mom an hour ago and his life mission is to kill us. He kept coming back over and over throughout the night, screaming shit, until we just ignored him. Never ended up killing us, though, So I guess he is pretty unfulfilled these days. Not me, but my husband. Back in 2006 to 2010, he worked nights. From 6 p.m. to 3 a.m. he would get sleepy on the drive home and would call me so that we could chat to keep him from falling asleep at the wheel. Sometimes, though, I'd fall asleep on the phone. Once he heard someone pick up the phone and say, "She passed out." It was a woman's voice, and I was the only woman that lived at our house, so. He said it wasn't my voice, and he freaked out and hung up and called me back, but it went straight to VM each time. His commute was 45 minutes, and he raced home as fast as he could. I got home calling out my name, which woke our 3 sons up, but we were all fine. No one else was there. I posited that I may have been the one to say it, like in my sleep? And maybe because I was asleep, my voice sounded different? But he was adamant that it wasn't me. Another time, he pulled over a couple of miles from home in a small church's parking lot. He got out to get some air and walked around. Despite me being on the phone with him, he was just too sleepy. This was the last stretch before reaching home, and he saw the empty parking lot and pulled in and walked around the truck briskly to get the blood flowing. Anyway, I asked where he'd pulled over, and he said, "That small church down the road, right around the bend." I knew what church it was and thoughtlessly replied, "The one next to the cemetery?" His sharp intake of breath and the sound of him getting back into the truck and slamming the door shut would have been hilarious if the next thing didn't happen. My husband is a skeptic and hates discussing anything supernatural. But he swears that as he pulled back onto the road, something heavy landed in the truck bed and was staring at him through the rear window. He said something and told him not to mention it to me or acknowledge it in any way. He felt it was imperative that he go on as if he were completely unaware of whatever it was. Heart pounding, he said he blabbered nonsensically about anything that came to mind. I was too sleepy to really notice, and I just thought he sounded kind of giddy or nervous. At some point, when he reached a 4-way stop, he sensed that whatever it was gone. He bypassed home and drove to a gas station a couple of miles away and sat in the bright fluorescent light, glad to see other trucks and people fueling up and getting ready for their day. Then he came home and didn't tell me about it for, months? It still gives me chills. Another one, back in 2020, one of our production leads passed away unexpectedly. He was the type of guy who always arrived super early and would daily confer with the night shift lead on schedules, workload, maintenance issues, etc. He was extremely well liked and had been with the company for over 20 years. His boss, whom I spoke with on a daily basis, called me a couple of weeks after his passing to share a video with me of some unexplained occurrences the men were bringing to his attention. Some of the snippets were negligible, shadows against the wall, mostly. But there were a couple of reoccurring instances that gave us pause. According to the plant manager, every morning, the lead and he would have a 15 to 20 minute meeting to discuss plans for the day. Since the guy had passed, the manager had been having discussions with an assistant. On several occasions, as evidenced by the clips, the door to his office would open and a dark shadow would move across the room, and then it was gone. These snippets were shown to our executives, and at a loss for what to do, they left it up to the plant manager and his team to decide. They brought in a lady who guided the spirit on, and apparently it worked. The strange activity ceased. But despite that, a couple of employees quit because they were too scared to come back and encounter any ghostly phenomena. I worked at multiple locations of a certain 24-hour diner chain during college. All of them have a ghost customer. The exact details of the story vary, but the general outline is the same. The guy only shows up on the night shift when the diner is otherwise empty and there's only one server and one cook working. He only shows up when you're in the back, and you don't hear the door open. He just shows up in the waiting area. He asks to be seated, and then he orders something you have to go into the back to get, like a cup of decaf coffee. Most diners don't keep a fresh pot of decaf going all night. By the time you come back, he's gone, and so are his menu and silverware. You didn't hear the door open when he left. And he never shows up for the cameras. Some diners claim he messes up the cameras and corrupts a few minutes of video. Others claim the cameras don't catch it at all, and if you review the footage, it seems like none of it ever happened and the server has been in the back the whole time. I never saw the ghost customer because I never worked a night shift solo. But every night shifter I've ever worked with would swear on their mother's grave that they'd seen the guy. I once acted in a horror short about 5 years ago. It was shot in a huge building that would house both Christmas and Halloween experiences. Both parts were completely separate. A lot of the decorations were still set up, but this place was huge, so we were there to shoot in other rooms. The electricity was down, so we had a generator, but only for the rooms we shot into. We got snowed in, and so we were just laughing about what a spooky place it was to be locked in, drinking and smoking weed, etc. I was buzzing because my acting career was on the up, Spoiler alert, it still hasn't worked out, and I felt cocky, so at one point I went alone into the Halloween section. For the record, I don't scare easily and have ADHD, so I am normally very calm in intense situations. People always say I'm great if there is a crisis. Anyway, I am using the small torch on my phone and going room to room checking out the scary stuff when I turn the corner, and there's a huge guy in his 30s who had the same idea as me. In shock, I back away, laugh, and say, "Fuck man, you scared me." The guy says nothing, so I bring the torch up to his face, and he's just staring at me. It took me a second to realize it was me in the mirror. It sounds stupid, but it scared the fuck out of me. Plus, I was high. So I used to work at this mortuary in San Jose doing maintenance and funeral service setups, setting up flowers, videos, and bringing out the decedent in the casket, and used to close the place up at night. One night, I was walking down the main hallway to the locked door that leads to the back hallways, where the staff could pass through. Behind that door is a T intersection. Left leads to the arranger's offices, another hallway of records, a printer room, etc. Going right leads to the prep room, cooler room, and basically where all the bodies are kept. So anyway, I was walking down the hallway in the dark, business as usual, and I always kept a finger to the wall just to feel it as a safety sensory thing. And I hit this little bump or dive in the wall with my fingers. This wall is parallel to the prep room, so all the bodies were in that room. I hear this little girl's voice that sounds almost like old-timey recorded, kind of scratchy, just plain creepy. I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about it. And this girl's voice said "found me" in a little giggle-like voice. Brother, let me tell you, I fucking ran down the rest of the hallway instantly, hooked it to the maintenance office, grabbed my shit, and left instantly. That scared the living piss out of me. One of the very few creepy instances I had working within the mortuary business. I did night shift stocking shelves at a grocery store for a few years. One night, one of my coworkers went to use the family bathroom at the back of the store, and it was locked. There were 3 of us there in total that night, and he had noticed us both on his way to the bathroom. It turns out that someone had passed out and they're doing drugs and that the closing shift didn't do their final walk to check the bathrooms like they were supposed to before closing the store to the public. The guy on the other side of the bathroom woke up and started freaking out about how he was trapped in the bathroom and called the cops on himself after my coworker kept trying the door. We let the cops in, the guy finally figured out how to unlock the door, he literally just had to turn the handle, and the cops arrested him. The experience itself wasn't all that scary other than him shouting while freaking out in the bathroom, but the fact that this guy could have been roaming the store without us knowing and doing who knows what is a frightening thought, especially since a couple of us listened to music while stalking. I worked at a 24/7 contact center that was in a mall in a not great area during the swing shift. The non-parkade entrance was the food court entrance, and we had key cards to get in at any time of day. I was going in well after mall hours when, just as the door was about to close behind me, I heard the door open again and saw 2 guys trying to get in. I ran back to close the door, but they kept pushing the door open, asking to use the pay phone, showing how old this is. One guy had his fingers in the door to keep me from closing it, and I was crushing them pretty well. Have to be on drugs was my next thought. Then they did one hard push, which I couldn't stop. Then they were both inside and took positions opposite sides of me. Most people will give up after getting their fingers slammed into a door. That's when I realized this might be serious. The far larger guy started saying SHT I didn't hear, then ran at me, so I pushed him into a massive planter near the door that broke that. The smaller guy then came after me, and we wrestled around and knocked some chairs over. I pushed him hard, and he seemed to fall over. So, knowing both were not paying attention to me, I bolted back to the office. I got back to the office and asked for security's number to tell them what happened and in case it happened again. It wasn't a huge fight, but the fact I was gasping and asking for the number made people realize it was serious. So at the end of the shift, all 50 plus of us left at the same moment, and they heard what happened, plus the broken planters and clear signs of struggle, knew it was me, and said, "That was you?" I was terrified at the time since I was sure I broke a finger or 2 of them, and they kept coming. Like, who does this to use the pay phone? 17 years old. I work as a security guard for a factory that I am too young to work in. The inept ex-sheriff who got into a fight with a factory supervisor and was banned from the property was my boss and head of security. I SHT you not. So anyway, it's about 3 a.m. on a Friday night. I spend my time walking laps around the building, checking doors, and watching security cameras. Just as I am finishing a lap and walking into the office, I hear a scream from the front lunchroom. Someone who went outside the break room to take a smoke break saw a body floating in the retention pond out front. I yell for someone to call the cops and jump in without thinking. I pulled the guy out. It was an old man wearing pajamas. He was cold and very much gone. It turns out it was an old man with Alzheimer's disease. He was in bed with his wife, woke up, hopped in his van, and just drove 5 miles to our factory. We had cameras over the parking lot but not over the pond, and the place was unfenced. Our camera showed him parking perfectly fine in our lot and just casually walking towards our pond. I have no idea why he did that. Just the disease, I guess. Pretty messed up for 17-year-old me. I work overnight on an acute mental health unit. Always short-staffed. I had to go into a patient's room around 1 a.m. to remove drinks and snacks because he was not allowed due to lab draws in the morning. The patient had a history of violence and, currently, psychosis and homicidal ideation. I walked across the room quietly, as I thought the patient was sleeping. He grabbed his cup and a few snacks, and he is standing in the doorway with something long and sharp, hard to see because it was dark. The patient had made a shiv out of a psych-safe pen, rolled paper, and tape. I wiped my badge on the wall reader to call a code for help. I pulled a plastic desk in front of me, ready to slam his legs with it. He just stood in the doorway, looking at me. I could hear the nurses rushing down the hall, so I yelled, "I need help, the patient has a weapon." I heard one of them say, "OSHT," and they reversed direction. I told the patient to drop it and let me leave. Patient and I just held position till security arrived, seemed like forever, but they say it was 90 seconds. They took him down and removed the weapon. My heart was beating so hard that my head hurt. I was shaking for hours.